the call of Christ our captain. For now the weak can say that they are strong in the strength that God has given. With shield of faith and belt of truth, stand against the devil's lies. And before his battle cry is love, reaching out to those in darkness. They're called to war, to love the captive soul, but to rage against and captor, and with the sword that makes no wounded whole. We will fight with faith and valor, when faced with trials on every side. We know the outcome is secure, and Christ will have the prize for which He died, an inheritance of nations. Arise, shine, for your light has come. Arise, shine, for the risen sun. Lift your eyes, God is making bright. Arise, oh church, arise. And see the cross where love and mercy meet, as the Son of God is stricken, and see His foes lie crushed beneath His feet, for the conqueror has risen. And as the stone is rolled away, Christ emerges from that grave. His lifted arms is till the day every eye and heart shall see. So Spirit come, strengthen every stride, give grace for every hurdle, that we may run with faith to win the prize, for serving good and faithful. The saints of old still line the way, telling triumphs of His grace. We heard it all and hunger for the day when with Christ we stand in glory. Arise, shine, for your light has come. Arise, your invitation to let it all go. And I see it now, I'm laying it down, and I know that I need you. Run to the Father, fall into grace, done with the hiding, the reason to wait. My heart needs a searching, soul needs a friend, so I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Whoa, whoa, again and again and again and again. You saw my condition, had a plan from the start. Your son for redemption, price for my heart. I don't have the context for that kind of love. Don't understand, and I can't comprehend. And all I know is I need you. I run to the Father, fall into grace, done with the hiding, reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend, so I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Whoa, whoa, whoa. My heart has been in your sight long before my first breath, running into your arms, running to life from death. And I feel this rush deep in my chest. Mercy is calling out, just as I am. You pull me in. I know I need you now. Run to the Father, fall into grace, done with the hiding, the reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend, so run to the Father again and again and again and again. Whoa, whoa, again and again and again and again. Whoa, whoa, again and again and again and again. Whoa, whoa, again and again and again and again.
Hello. Welcome, church. Good morning. My name is Victor. I'm filling in for Pastor Daniel today. Before you sit down, we're going to continue one of our little traditions that we have here for the English ministry here at Arise Church. And we're going to open up today with a welcome question that Pastor Daniel picked out. I think it's because he's on vacation. But if you could speak another language, what would it be? Greet, like just hello to everyone around you and just answer that question. I think personally I would like Korean, but go ahead and answer for greet everyone around you, and we'll come back in a few minutes.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You've been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your
Okay.
life.
We all can grab a seat, and I got a couple of announcements to make before we bring up our guest speaker for today. First announcement we have is, I think, worship night. I think yes, no, maybe yes. Coming this Friday from 7 to 9. I think here in this room. It's gonna be on Zoom too, but we encourage you to come in person and join us for a night of worship and fellowship, and just a night of reflecting on how faithful God has been for in your lives and for the church. And then following on Sunday, it's a kind of a celebratory thing, but we got a couple baptisms coming after service on Sunday at 11:30. Yay! They're actually sitting right in front right here. I'm going to point them out right here to embarrass them. Micaiah and Lotan are getting baptized next Sunday. Hope if you can make it in person, great. If not, I think we're recording it, so if you can't miss out, if you miss out on it, we'll have it recorded, watching them get dunked in that thing. Next coming up after that, I think is, oh yeah, bring bring some sort of receptacle for water because we're in a drought. We don't want to waste any of the water we fill this with. So next week, if you want to bring like a bucket, a couple of jugs, whatever to water your garden, wash dishes, whatever, it's holy water. So whatever you water with it or wash with it, it become holy, really holy plants and holy dishes. And then next we have coming up in a couple of weeks after baptism, we're just gonna have a come together as a church family and just cast out a vision for the remainder of this year and going forward as a ministry. It's coming up on Saturday, August 27th from 11 to 2. There'll be lunch, and then there'll be a dialogue between us and Pastor Daniel just to see what's coming up in the next few months, maybe out the next for the year, for the church, for the ministry, and then after that, the next day, we have a family carnival. Woo! Where we're gonna play some games, have some food after church on Sunday. It's $5 for the families, but guests are free. Free if you invite any guests invited are free. We encourage you to invite any families you know from your neighborhoods or whatever to join us and basically have a little fun before I guess it gets real nasty with school. And then finally, I would like to bring up our guest speaker for today. He's been here before. We all love him. His name is David. Too many D's. He's pastor, family counselor, and other stuff. Let's give a round of applause and welcome him up.
Wow, that's exciting that you will be having baptism. Is this going to be the first baptism since the pandemic? So this is the first one in like 2 years. Wow, that is exciting. So that'd be even better if you had recycled some water from 2 years ago, and then bring it in. Or I don't know if any of you put a tub under your shower. you know, and when you shower, to reuse that water. Anyone do that? So bring that water too. And but hopefully that'll be a test for those who are getting baptized, how faithful they are. Right? No, I'm just kidding. No, so I'm a pastor of a house church, and I'm checking out your tub because that's a good one, because we have a couple of people who have expressed interest, but we need a portable one. And so I'm like, that looks like. So I'm always checking out other people's baptism tubs. You know how like when you're remodeling and you go to someone's house, you look at their kitchen. So I'm doing that for baptism tubs. But I do miss being at the church that I was at for 15 years. I miss all of the baptisms that I was part of, and grateful for the opportunity. But I have so many funny, awkward stories revolving around baptisms. And the worst ones, I think, are the ones that, because I don't know, I have a horrible memory, and I think I have like mild undiagnosed dyslexia. So sometimes when I get sequences off, then I'm off. So I do remember I had baptized a few people. You know how you say in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit? I think there were a couple times where I'm like, in the name of the Son, Father, and not baptize them. And so there's quite a few people in my church that just aren't baptized. They're only baptized with the 2 out of the 3. So, but anyways, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me. Is anyone getting ready for school to start this coming week or the next 2 weeks? Oh, really? Oh, wow. How about for any parents? You're done? Yeah, a couple of you? Oh, are you like ready? Are you ready? No. Really? You want your kids to stay home longer? Wow. I could drop off my kids if you like, and if that helps, But no, we're ready, and my oldest will be starting high school for the first time, hopefully the first and only time. And so it's like, I don't know for those of you who had kids that are older, but she's starting to enter this stage where her vocabulary I do not understand. Like there's certain words, right? So a couple years ago it was like sus, So the other day, her and her friends were over, and I'm like, you guys want some watermelon? So I cut them some watermelon, and I was wearing my favorite T-shirt. It's a Kirkland. It says Kirkland, from Costco, and so it was my favorite T-shirt. So one of her friends says in her like teenage dry voice, she goes, "Wow, that T-shirt is drip." It's like, what's drip, right? And I don't know. And then being the fun, cool dad that I am, I said, "Oh yeah, it's so drip, it's dripping, because I'm the drippiest." And then both of them gave me a look like, "Oh my gosh, like what is wrong with him?" And then my daughter, she's like my wife. She gives me this smile, that polite smile, but like I hate you smile. Those smiles. And then usually when my wife she does the same thing my wife does. If she tilts her head to the right, it's like, that's kind of weird. But to the left, and a vein popping out, I was like, oh my gosh, I hate this guy. How much longer? And so, yeah, I still don't know. I've been I've been on the pursuit and search of what drip means. And so, could I ever name a sermon the drip sermon? Would that work? No. Oh, look at the pain in their eyes. Like, oh, their ears are starting to bleed. Okay, how about the drippiest sermon? No. Okay. Anyways, so today we are going to talk about how Christians can find themselves on the edge of grace. And what I mean by how a lot of times Christians can find themselves on the edge of grace is right here. It's like right here. But for some reason, they haven't been able to cross over to experience it and to be in it. So for whatever reason, they just can't cross over. They're just like on the edge, just on the tip. And so we're gonna talk about that and look at, well, why is that? And how does God address those issues that a lot of us as Christians have when we're just on the tip. We're just there, and for whatever reason, whether it's our views of how life should work, or how we have not been able to perform or do what we should do, whatever reason, why is it that it's so hard to cross over and to be in grace, right? In God's grace. And so, but before we do that, can I ask another thing, just so also I could set up. In just a moment, can you turn to the next person next to you and share with them one embarrassing thing that you have done in your life? All right, like anything embarrassing that you can think of. As you think of yours, I could share with you one thing that I did, and I can't remember if I shared this before, but a few years ago, I took some teens. This is like in the 90s. I took some teens to go white water rafting, and then what was really horrible about this white water rafting is someone almost drowned. And the worst part about who almost drowned was me. I was the one that almost drowned on this trip. I'm the leader. Okay, and so what happened was everyone starts swimming without their life jackets, right? And I'm like, oh, okay. I guess I would take off my life jacket and swim as well, because I'm a decent, confident swimmer. I took like 2 lessons when I was in 3rd grade. So I start swimming, and my legs are cramping, and I start sinking. And then everyone was off the raft swimming, but there was one 13-year-old girl on the raft still, right? So I thought, I'm starting to sink. Let me just get the 13-year-old to row herself towards me. And this should have been like a moment where I realized that God was giving me a foreshadow of what having a 13, 14-year-old daughter would be like. So I'm like, hey, can you row over? And you would think this girl seeing me like sinking, right? You think, seeing me sink, she would say, oh, yeah, sure, I could see that you're sinking. Let me roll over, right? You would think she'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll come over. I'll help you, Pastor David, right? And also, I'm a pastor, right? She'd be like, he's a pastor. If he goes, there goes our sermons. And then one of us has to give sermons, you would think she would think that, right? But instead, as I'm like, hey, can you help me? I'm sinking a little bit. I think I'm drowning. Can you roll over? And again, we're only like from here to here, right? Distance, and I just need some help. And so instead of saying, sure, let me help you, she just says, no, and then turns around. And then I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, am I going to right before I die, am I going to say certain adjectives that I'm not going to be proud of? And that's my last words, towards a 13-year-old. And so luckily, as I'm sinking, and I'm like, come on, please. She goes, no. And then even then she starts moving away from the edge of the raft, right? And I'm like, what the heck? And so luckily, there was this party raft. I don't know if you've ever seen these, but there was a party raft, and I think it was a sorority and fraternity group, and they're all just having a time of their life. As I'm sinking, they just glide by, right? And as they're gliding by, someone on the raft, right? Now, there must have been 20 people on this raft, right? They're just all drinking. They all look like Greek gods, kind of a thing. And so they're all drinking, having a good old time. And then one of them goes, hey, is that dude drowning? And then 20 of them go, yeah. And then one of them goes, we should do something, right? Yeah, right? And then they just toss me a lifesaver. You would think they would reach out and grab me up and let me join the party, but instead they just threw a lifesaver that's attached to the raft, and they never even reeled me in. So I get on the life whatever saver thing, and I'm just floating for 20 minutes until my raft figures out what's happening to me, and they catch up, and then I finally hop on. So it's just really embarrassing. And so, what about you? What is one embarrassing? It doesn't have to be as long of a story. I kind of embellished the story a little bit, just a little bit. The girl only said no 2 times, not 3 times. But turn to the person next to you and share one moment that you, one thing that you did that was so embarrassing. Maybe it was in front of a lot of people. Maybe it was in front of your family. Maybe it was a first date. Maybe whatever it is, whatever comes to mind. Share that with the person next to you. Go. take another 30 seconds, if you don't mind. 30 seconds. All right. Sorry if I'm cutting into the buildup of your the plot of your embarrassing moment, but the reason why I start with that question, right? You know, what is one embarrassing thing that you did? You know, did you do something that was embarrassing? Is this? See, the reason why a lot of Christians are kind of on the edge, just right on the edge, not fully immersed in grace, but they're just on the edge of grace. They see it, they know about it, they can describe it. They're on the edge of God's grace because of this. We built a lot of our faith and we built a lot of our identity as Christians based on what we do. What we did, what we do, or what we will do. And we build our sense of who we are as Christians, a lot of us, based on what we do. And we also measure other people's faith based on what they do, right? And even if what they do can sometimes be overshadowed by what they did, right? And so, you know, oftentimes the reason why a lot of us as Christians struggle with grace is because of what we do or what we're supposed to do, what others are supposed to do. And the reason why I start with that, you know, little embarrassing story, you know, question is this. A lot of us, we get embarrassed because of what we did, right? You get judged by what you did. You get laughed at what you did. I remember, you know, the group, the teens that I took, not only did they get mad at me, they laughed at me. It was your fault, you know, and then, you know, it's like, that's what you did, right? And then for like, I don't know, 15 years, I kept bringing it up. Hey, it's a drowning guy, you know, right? And if you think about it, that is also a lot of how we form our own identity, right? It's based on what we did, based on what we're doing, and based on what we will do one day, right? And so what we're going to see is we're going to look at a passage that a very familiar story about two brothers who interact with their father based on what they do. And we're going to also look at the implications of that. But the reason why we're talking about this is I wonder some of us in here are feeling a little burnt out as Christians because of how hard you are trying to do the right thing. Or maybe some of us in here, you're in a place in your life where you maybe made some mistakes because of what you did. And because of that, you do feel kind of distant from God's grace. Maybe you hear stories of people saying, oh, I experienced forgiveness, right? Or I felt God's mercy. And when you hear those stories, you're like, I can describe what you're telling me. I can identify intellectually what you're talking about, but I can't feel it. But also maybe there are some of us in here who are on the other side, where we find ourselves a bit angry, a bit bitter, a little bit bitter, a little resentful. Because maybe for you, you're doing all the things that you should be doing, while everyone else, or there's certain people in your life, aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, but yet it seems like God is blessing them. God's giving them those jobs. God's giving them those relationships. God's giving them whatever that they need, and it just seems so easy. Meanwhile, you are working so hard to do the right thing, and you just feel like God is withholding from you. And so you see a lot of those things, whatever end you are with the doing, whether it's something you've done or something that you are working on now and what you're doing now, you're on this side of grace. You're on the other side of grace. You see it, you see grace on the other side. You maybe get tingling sensations of it, but it's nothing more than an intellectual, theological idea. And so what we want to do is look at this passage and see two brothers who were on this side of grace. But then we're going to look at how the Father interacts with these two brothers to show them what grace really means and how to be part of that grace. And so if you have your Bibles, turn with me to Luke chapter 15, and we'll look at verses 11. As I get my reading glasses on. I don't know if you know, but there's been this world pandemic where everything written has gotten smaller. You know, you guys know that? Like, everything has just gotten smaller. So then, as a result, like, you know, I have to wear glasses, just like a lot of you, right? Yeah, right. You know, anyone else? Only a few of us know about this pandemic. You know, this things have shrunk, right? If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's because you never had to worry about wearing glasses at some point. It's more like I'm like, wait a minute. It's like. And then, you know what's worse is sometimes I forget my glasses, and then if I'm reading a text in front of people, and then I misread the word because I can't see it, and then it's like, okay, I gotta get used to wearing glasses. Let's start with verse 11. What we'll do is we'll work through we'll work our way through this passage, make some observations, and then what we'll do is we'll look at, okay, what are some what's the word? False assumptions that these brothers have. But how does the Father address these false assumptions? Now, right before we read verse 11, I think it's really important for us to read verse 1 of chapter 15. It says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him." This is Jesus. So tax collectors, sinners, right? Tax collectors were the worst of the worst. They not only worked for the Roman Empire, the corrupted government, but they were also corrupted as well. Not only would they collect taxes for the Roman government, but they also they made up new taxes just so that they can supplement their, high-end car income, right? Or their, lavish lifestyle. And then because interest rates have skyrocketed, they had to collect more because, for a bowl of pho, they got to spend $20 now, so they got to collect more from you, right? And so in verse 2 it says, "And the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, 'This man receives sinners and eats with them.'" So here is a group of people, like a hodgepodge, a motley crew. It's a strange, spectrum of different people, all here listening to Jesus. And what's incredible is from the previous two parables to now this parable, he addresses every single one that is in the crowd. And here he talks about the lost sheep, the missing coin, and now we're going to see he goes from possession to a person that was lost. And so let's start with verse 11. "There was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that is coming to me.'" Now, up until this point, everyone in the audience can agree that's horrible. That's like the tax collector, the sinner who's done wrong, maybe the murderer that's in amongst them is like, that's shady, right? That's that's gangster, you know? That's like, I don't know if people still say gangster. That's sus. That's sus. That's sussy, right? That's such a sussy thing to do, right? You know? And you think about it, that's one thing they all can agree on in this story. Like, oh, that is horrible. Like, you never wrong your parents that way. You could be an evil person, but you never wrong your parents, right? Like that. Because basically, that son is saying, hey, Dad, I don't care if you live or you die. I just want my money. I don't care about you. All I care is what you have. You get it? All I care is your possessions. And I don't care that I take what belongs to me, even though it's really yours, and you worked so hard for it. And after I take my share and leave, I don't care now that you're going to be missing. You know, supposedly back then he probably got 1/3 of it, right, based on the system, perhaps. So I don't care if you are missing 1/3 of your income. And I know if I heard a famine is coming, but I don't care. I don't care about you. I don't care about any of these people on this property. I just want what is mine. So everyone's like, "Whoa, that guy's selfish." You know, it's a bad thing when, you know, evil people are like, "Man, that's messed up," right? And so now, to everyone's shock to the story, it says, and he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. Later on in this passage, you find out there's a little bit more to this reckless living. There's an antidote to his reckless living. Part of his reckless living was with prostitutes. So you can imagine he moved to the city, bought a condo for $3 million, right? You know, buy high. That's my strategy with investments. I buy high and sell low. You know? That's not a good strategy, by the way. I'm just saying you should buy low, sell high. Anyways, so you know he's buying a condo during a time when it's just so expensive. And there's one thing if you don't have a choice, right? It's one thing if you don't have a choice and you have to buy something. But here he doesn't. He has a choice, right? He has a choice. He doesn't have to. But he takes that money, buys a condo, buys a couple of, Aston Martins, and then a practical Tesla, just a practical, just for environment, right? So very practical. And he has maybe a girlfriend here, a girlfriend there, and then a prostitute apparently here, a prostitute there. Parties here, parties there, and he's just doing all these things. And so what happens? In verse 14, and when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he spent all his money, and then the famine comes. And now he spent everything, and he doesn't have anything left. So in verse 15, now his bonds have been repossessed. He's been kicked out of his condo. He doesn't have any money to party with his friends, and he doesn't have enough money to buy even companionship. And that's how sad his situation is. The possessions that he had could not get him what he wanted because he ran out. So, in verse 15, so he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields and to feed pigs. Now, this is like the lowest of the low, all right? And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. He was so desperate that the pigs were eating better than him. Now, this part of the story, everyone's like in agreement, like, yeah, he deserves that, right? In the story, all the Pharisees, all the tax collectors, all the sinners, they all agree, like, yeah, that's what he gets, right? That's what he gets because of what he did, right? That's what he gets. And then verse 17, but when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? But I perish here with hunger. Now, he's not thinking about his relationship with his father. He's just thinking objectively as a character of who his father is. And so he's just thinking, I'll come back to him because I know I'm not his son anymore because of what? What I did. Right? I know I don't deserve to be his son because of what I did. But I know that my dad is a decent man, and maybe he's hired like criminals of criminals to work for him. Maybe he'll hire me. Right? And so, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? Oh, okay, in verse 18. I will arise and go to my father. I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And he rose and came to his father. So now, remember, he's got this speech rehearsed, right? And he's pinning a lot of his hopes and dreams on this speech, right? And he's pinning his hopes and dreams on the speech because of what? Because of what he did. He's hoping now if he could conjure up some emotion out of his father, out of his speech that he can do, then just maybe his father will take him in. I wonder how many of us have made a similar speech in our prayers. Right? When we don't get what we want, or we're about to get something that we know we don't want to get, so then we rehearse this speech to God. Maybe we'll intensify that speech with some fasting. Maybe we'll intensify it with some worship music in the background. Maybe we'll intensify it with just, doing good deeds, hoping God will hear our prayer, our speech. So then what happens? So he goes, and as he rose and came to his father, catch that part. This is so important. But while he was still a long way off. So he's walking, right? He's walking. He hasn't faced his dad yet. He hasn't made the speech yet. What happens? He hasn't done anything yet. All he did was just walk, right? Then what happens? His father saw him and felt what? Compassion. Now think about that just for a moment. He felt compassion. Did he do anything in this situation to deserve compassion? Did his father hear the speech? Did his father know that he rehearsed the speech? Did his spies come back to him and go, hey, Larry, you're that deadbeat son of yours, he's been practicing this speech. Oh, you got to hear the speech. There's epic music. He's going to play some epic music in the background as he gives you the speech. You're going to love it. No, right? So what brings out the compassion? All we see here is what? He's just walking back to his father. And then when his father saw him and felt compassion, that compassion in the nuance of the basically the Greek that was translated into this Aramaic, which is Jesus speaking, it's not just like, oh, look at that, little puppy, oh, it's hungry, right? It's like this inner pain, but it's also like packaged with pain and got to do something about it. Right? It's not just like, oh, and you just drive by, right? You see someone suffering on the side, oh, that's horrible, and you just go on. But it's like this inner compulsion that comes out because you see some pain and you have to do something about that. The closest thing you ever have to that is if you have kids, right? If you have kids, and if you don't have to have kids to have this kind of inner compulsion to come out. But it usually is a little bit more natural, right? If you do want to have kids and when you want to have kids, right? And so his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. Can you imagine that? Taking him in, holding his son. Think about that, where the son has been, what the son has done. But the father takes him in and kisses him because he means that much to him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, right? So the son's like, okay, Dad, okay. I need to make a speech here. I rehearse a speech. Hold on. Let me press play on my phone so it really adds to the story, or to my speech. Father, I have sinned against heaven before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But what happens in verse 22? You catch it. It's not even like the father stands there and waits for the son, right, to say the speech, and then, okay, son, now you may bow down 5 times, right? And then we'll have you go do some rehab, right? Then we'll we'll have you get a haircut. We're gonna get you washed, and then maybe after we'll have a 2-year probation, right? Then maybe, just maybe, and then I'll take you in. But catch what happens. He's like in the middle of his speech, and the father just cuts him off almost. You notice the father doesn't even address the speech. He wasn't like, hey, cool story, bro, right? Like, hey, great story, great speech. Wow, I love the build-up. Wow, you spoke to my heart. What does the father do? But the father said to his servants, interruption, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet. And not only, so bring on this son of mine. Take off all that clothes that represents where he's been. Now put on new clothes because of where he is now with me. And not only is we're going to put the best clothes on him, but we're going to have a party. We're going to have the best party. We're going to have the kind of party where you have the fattened calf party, right? It's like equivalent to renting out a huge auditorium kind of a party. It's kind of like the kind of party that you would throw for your favorite child's wedding. Or maybe, for those of us who are, Asian, it's the kind of party you throw because your child got their PhD in medicine and also started an IPO company and also knows perfect Cantonese and Mandarin and Vietnamese and knows how to cook and does all those perfect things. That kind of a party, right? But you get it. But you catch what's going on here. Is he throwing him a party because of what the son has done? Doesn't deserve it, right? Does he give the party because of the speech? Right? Like, wow, that was an amazing speech. But what happens? He throws a party because his son is home, right? Bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead. Not literally, but dead to me. Dead to me in my relationship with him. He cut me off, so he is dead to me in relationship, if that makes sense. And then, for this son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found, and they began to celebrate. Now, verse 25. Now his older son was in the field, and he came and drew near to the house. He heard music and dancing. Can you imagine this poor, any older siblings in here? You know the feeling, huh? You know that feeling, right? You're like, the toys that, when it was your turn to get toys, you had to earn those toys, remember? And then you come home and you see that Target bag. And then you're like, looks like there's a toy in that bag for my younger sibling. I don't remember what they did, right? Remember that feeling? Has this happened to any of you? For those of you older siblings, you took on the old car. You come home seeing a brand new car parked on the driveway, but that belongs to your younger sibling. You come home and you're like, hey, there's a brand new car. Who's that for? And then you find out what? Oh my gosh, it's not for me. It's for my younger sibling. The one that, doesn't try as hard. And so poor guy, right? And he came and he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And when he said to him, your brother has come. Oh, can you imagine? Like, what? I would be like, if I was him, I would be like that. Whoops. Yeah. If I was him, I would be that 13-year-old girl that was in the raft. No, right? Like no. But what happens? He goes no, and then it gets even better. Like what? This party is for Larry? Then what happens? And then they're like, there's one more thing. There's just one more thing. You know, your brother's home, your dad's throwing a huge party, right? And he's like, yeah? He's like, get ready. There's one more thing. Remember that big old cow we were saving up to eat? Remember that? It's like, yes. Well, your dad killed it, so we can and has a whole town over to celebrate. It's like, whoa. But he was angry. Okay, your father has killed the fattened calf because he has received him back and safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But the father, now get this. Remember, earlier the father runs out to the lost son, right, to the younger son. What's happening here? The father comes out, leaves his party, and in those days, that's like you never disappear from your own party. Then that can cause rumors. You know what else can cause rumors? Talk about losing face, right? Why isn't the older brother at the party? And so then the father leaves the party, leaves the celebration. Has that ever happened to any of you? You're at a party, having a good time. Maybe one friend leaves because they're upset, and you're like, oh, I have to like deal with this. I'm having such a good time. Or maybe for some of you parents, you're at a good lunch, you're at some kind of party, you're having a good time, and then one of your kids throws a tantrum and just leaves, right? Like, I have to deal with this. But you notice the father comes out. Right? And look at how the father interacts with them. The father doesn't go, what is wrong with you? Can't you see all your family is here and your cousins are here and the neighbors? What will they think of us? Who cares that your brother messed up? Just don't lose face. Notice the father doesn't do that. He addresses him where he's at. But he answered but he was angry. His father came out and treated him. But he answered his father, look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your commands. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I may. It's like, I didn't ask for a big cow. I just wanted a young goat, That's like asking for like the smallest thing, right? Like, I just want a rotisserie chicken, from Costco. That would have been enough that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed a fattened calf for him, right? So you get his interaction here saying, yet you never gave me. I worked all these years to get these possessions from you. You catch that? Nowhere does it say, I worked all these years so that I can win your love. He's not talking about that. Look, I have served you and I never disobeyed your commands. Look, I have done all the right things. I have never disobeyed you. I have always done the right thing. And yet he's on this side of grace. But the father who's full of grace comes over to him. Just like the father full of grace comes over to the younger son. And this is what he says. And he said to him, son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. He's saying, look, those possessions that you want, you have access to it. It's already there. I've actually offered it to you, but you didn't want it because you didn't felt like you deserved it. You had to earn it. What I have is yours. But catch what he's saying here. He said to him, son, you are always with me. And he continues this. He's saying here, what is more important is you being with me. What is more important is not what you do, but being on this side with me. Not what you do, not what your younger brother did, but being with me. And that's why we're celebrating. And so he says, And it was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. Let me finish just a couple thoughts. These brothers, both brothers, had a false assumption that it was more about doing than being with. The Father, what Jesus is teaching here is, it's not about what you do. Now, some of you may question, well, then does that mean we don't have to do anything? If you're even asking that question, you're not thinking about what it means to be with. You get it? Let's say, I'll give you an example. You got a filthy rich, person, and got a servant, and you got his son. Let's say the filthy rich person asks his servant and his son to wash 2 of his cars. Let's just say. So the servant, who obviously works so that he doesn't get fired, right? So he can get a promotion, right? That's going to be his ethos, right? But the son, who has everything, between the two, who will do a better job of washing the car? Now, generally speaking, and if you read studies, they've actually done studies on this. I was just reading an article from the BBC. Those are one of those things where you're like, am I getting older? How come I'm starting to read stuff from the BBC, But there were these studies, and they were sharing all these anecdotes from different studies. But generally speaking, workers who work with that sort of pressure of not being fired actually perform worse. Now, you may get a good boost from them at first, but what's going to happen? They wear out because they're burnt out. They're stressed. They're anxious. So they burn out. And so they're going to be distracted. So I imagine the servant would do a pretty good job. But he'll be like frustrated. He'll be angry. He'll be like yelling at other people, do it this right. But what if the son was on this side of the Father's grace and love? What if he felt loved by his own father? What if he knew his Father's love? What if he experienced the Father's love? What if he was able to always know that he had a place to call home? He always knew that whatever he may have done could never take away the love that his Father has for him. And out of that created a sense of safety. My mom taught me this in her own Vietnamese mom way. One day she was telling me randomly, you guys ever have this? I don't know, you maybe do this to your kids, but randomly, I was driving my mom somewhere, and I was like 25. Okay, so I was like 23 actually. It's not like I was a kid. I was 23, so I'm driving my mom, and she goes, "Hey son," in Vietnamese. She goes, I have a 3-strike rule, right? And I'm like, why'd she tell me about this 3-strike rule? It's so random, right? And I'm feeling I shared this story before. But so she goes, I have a 3-strike rule. So I'm like, I didn't know she follows baseball, right? Not bad for a refugee from Vietnam, has been here for 30 years, and she's catching on to the American lingo, She goes, I have the 3-strike rule. One person messes with me once, and she pauses, looks away. She goes, it's okay, once. And then she goes, but if they mess with me twice, she put her finger towards me. They mess with me twice. It's not good, but it's okay. But then she goes, but if they mess up 3 times, with this voice too, like 3 times. She didn't even answer me like for 5 minutes. She just looked away, like, she just kept telling me, I'm like, okay. She goes, you know what happens when they mess with me 3 times? I'm like, what? They struck out, right? So here's her lesson for me, right? You know how as a kid you're like, okay, I'm waiting for the lesson. She goes, and with you struck out a long time ago. But because you're my son, I keep you around. So I'm like, after 20 years of therapy, no, I'm just kidding. No. But I get what my mom is saying. It's like, I will always be her son. I I will always be her son. You know? And as I've gotten older and matured, I've learned to appreciate that more and more. And because I've learned to appreciate that, not what she does for me, but who she is to me. Get it? Not what she does for me. See, I think a lot of times we're on this side of grace because we expect what God can do for you. But what God is saying here to both brothers is, I can give you so much more than possessions. I can give you me. I am greater than your possessions. I am more valuable than these possessions. I am everlasting. I give life. I resurrect life. I restore. I heal. I am with you always. And so, as we close, I want to ask you, where are you with grace? Which sibling do you find yourself more like? And all I want to ask you to do is this. Let God meet you. Let God meet you. It's very abstract, okay? I know. Very, very abstract. But maybe one way you can let God meet you is talk to him. Go to him. Share with him. There's a guy that, he's one of those guys that says, God can't forgive me. It's funny, he's lived both sides. It's like, God can't forgive me for what I've done. And then after a while, he tries to, I think righteousness, our self sense of self-righteousness that we work so hard to achieve, I think a lot of times it's to cover up for what we've done. Don't you think? So he went on this side, where he started becoming very righteous, trying to follow the Catholic Church ways. It's all about doing. But this would always pop up. This would always pop up, and this side would never be satisfying. And he always felt distant from God. And so part of what, we were talking about is then he's like, what? We read this story, and it was like the first time, like, he could be real. And the first time he can just actually cry and grieve what he's done and what he's not able to do. And to find out it's not about what he does, but it's about God, what God does for him. Oh, going back to the servant and the son, I think the son would do a better job because he is filled with his father's love. And he's knowing, he's not, and he doesn't want to take advantage of, because his father's never taking advantage of him. So how can he? Why would he not try his best? But going back to this person, so what he started to do, and he was sharing this one time he went to God when he came home after a stressful day at work, and then he shares this great story. He's walking, he says he was just having a stressful day. Normally he just talks to God, right? And all of a sudden he sensed and felt that God was saying, like he felt like God was actually putting his hand down over him. And then he said he felt like, and he's not like a supernatural, like, he starts levitating kind of a guy, But he was just like, I sensed that God was just over me, and he told me to reach up and to hold his hand. And so we're all listening. We're like, so what did you do? He's like, so I just reached up, and I held his hand. And he's like, I felt something, right? I felt something. And so he just walked around like this. And as amazing as that was he was saying, and for one of the first times in his life, he felt a father's love that he never had, but he felt it in his God, the Father's hand, holding him. And so he said he just walked around like this. He said it was really weird. It was really awkward, but he didn't care. And so I'm not going to suggest that you go walk around like this. We're going to start a movement, okay? We're going to start a new worship movement. I want to ask you to go to God and let him be your father. Let him be your father. Just let him be a father full of grace, and be his son, be his daughter. Just talk to him, whether it's big things or little things. Just talk to him. I went way over. Let me close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you're who you are is so, it's so just obvious here. And we thank you for this story that Jesus shares with the tax collectors, the sinners, the scribes, and the Pharisees. But he also shares the story with us today. Help us to go beyond the abstract, but actually to see you for who you are and for what you offer. So we are so thankful for you, not for what you do for us. I mean, of course, that's huge, God. We thank you for being you, being a father, being a God that is in control, but is also a God that offers forgiveness, that offers love, that offers life. So, Lord, how can we not want to go to you? How can we get caught up looking at what other people have done when we have everything that we need from you? So we thank you and we love you and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
So, from the perspective of God, as Pastor David said, we've probably struck out so many times, all of us. We've made so many mistakes in the eyes of God, but yet He is still always there for us, and He still always loves us, even though, we're wretches. We're still made His treasure, and so, no matter what, we should always depend on the fact that, our Lord is our Father, and that we should always run towards Him. So let's all stand together and sing "How Deep the Father's Love for Us." How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that He should give His only Son to make a richest treasure. How great the pain of searing loss! The Father turns His face away, as boots which for the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon the cross, my sin upon His shoulders. Ashamed, I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held Him there, until it was accomplished. His dying death has brought me life. I know that it is finished. I will not boast in anything no gifts, no power, no wisdom, but I will boast in Jesus Christ, oh, his death and resurrection. Why should I gain from his reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart, his wounds have paid my ransom. But this I know with all my heart, his wounds have paid my ransom.
Let's close. May the love of the Father, the work of the Son, and the guidance and power of the Holy Spirit lead us this next week, especially this next week, to live our lives knowing and experiencing your love. Amen.